I do.
Print them really quick for me.
Okay. All right. So we are up and running. We'll give everybody just a couple minutes to get on there. We'll let you know kind of how it's going to work this evening. We have about just a little over 20 questions that people have sent in prior to the event. So we will go through the list of written questions that we have first. And then if you have more questions, please just type them into the chat. Faith is here helping me run it, so she will read those off once we get to that event. So it looks like we have a few people joining. We'll give it just a few more seconds, maybe another minute or two before we start live with the questions. And Faith is here helping me run it, so she will. And we're gonna have to shut off her audio, so she can't hear me. Okay. Um, Looks like we're getting some people in, so let's go ahead and start through some of the questions. Like I said, I have about 20, a little over 20 that people have asked prior to the event. So we'll go through those, and then feel free to type more questions as we go, and then whatever's left, we'll just keep going until we have all the questions answered. So the first question that we got ahead of time was, why can't I look at my utility bill online? The answer to that is you can if you're signed up for our Express Utility Pay. So if you have signed up for online pay, there's actually a portion where it will send you a notice and you can follow a link and look at your usage. It will send you some reminders for your bill as well. If you do not have that set up yet, then you cannot look at it online. Our software doesn't allow us to do that yet. We'll continue to look and continue to upgrade those features, but right now you can only see your bill online if you have Express Bill Pay. So that's your first answer. Second question was, does the city have a night sky ordinance and how is it enforced? That's a great question. There is a night sky ordinance. It's chapter 18 in the city code. How is it enforced is an entirely different question. Unfortunately, because of the changes in technology, the current night sky ordinance is fairly unenforceable. So here's an example of why it doesn't work the way it was written. A lot of it's in foot candles, which probably most of you don't have a foot candle meter laying around. Neither does the city. Additionally, it has restrictions such as people can only have a 60-watt bulb in front of their front door. When it was written, that made a lot of sense. 600 or 60-watt bulb is about 800 lumens, which is the standard measure of light today. However, it doesn't take into account any new technology such as LEDs. If you stuck a 60-watt LED bulb on your front door, that would be 80,000 lumens. So 800 to 80,000 is a pretty big difference. There are some parts of it that can be enforced. Moving, flashing lights, signs, we do enforce that occasionally. In fact, we're in discussions with a couple businesses now on their lights. Additionally, the night sky ordinance said that all of the street lights should be compatible by 2017. That has not happened. The city only owns a portion of the streetlights. Northwestern Energy also owns a portion of the streetlights. So we will have to continue to upgrade those as we go. The city is, in any streetlight now that fails, is replacing it with LEDs. The fixture themselves, however, are fairly expensive, and the city doesn't have the money pretty much to replace all of those at one time. Other than that, there is a night sky ordinance rewrite that is probably going to happen in the next little bit. We're talking city government, so the next little bit, probably the next year or two. The Conservation Board is working on that right now. I think they're going to have some recommendations to come forth fairly soon. We'll tie that in with the wrap up of the growth policy, and then probably look to update the night sky ordinance so that it is more enforceable and honestly just makes more sense to people with the current technology. A related question is, why is it so dark in certain parts of the city? Some of that is related to the night sky ordinance. We tried to reduce the amount of streetlights that were required, and during some development phases in Livingston, the streetlight requirements were very low, and so not all neighborhoods have the same number of streetlights as other neighborhoods. That is something that is in our current subdivision regulations. So any new subdivisions do have a streetlight requirement. But those portions that were built without those requirements are fairly dark. So if you like the night sky, that's great. If you have trouble seeing when you're out for a walk, that may not be as great. Um, there was a question that asked me to respond to all the letters to the editor. Um, if you read today's paper, there is a response from me to some recent letters to the editor. However, there's a lot of those. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions, uh, but if I don't think I have the bandwidth to try and answer all the letters to the editor, uh, me personally or the computer. Um, the next sent in question was, why do you feel it was appropriate? I'm actually going to combine a couple of these. I think I combine a couple of these. Why do you feel it was appropriate to use CARES Act money to purchase a building instead of supporting local businesses? And additionally, why did you feel it was appropriate in general to use CARES Act monies to purchase a building? We'll give you some background on the CARES Act and how it worked. And that is also in the paper today, at least a short synopsis. But in general, the CARES Act money um, is not just given to the city. So the state did get about 1.25 billion, which is a big number, in CARES Act funding, and they allocated about 300 million of that, but then they later reduced it to 200 million for local governments, whether that's counties or cities. But what they did not do was just pass it on to us. So they didn't hand us a sack of money and said, this is a CARES Act money, spend it on CARES Act things. What they did is say, if you spend money on CARES Act items, you can submit that to the state for reimbursement. And so that's what we have been doing through the process. We have submitted reimbursements for things like new computers or like the Zoom platform that we had to use to start being able to work more remotely or to be able to communicate or hold meetings remotely. Items like that were then submitted to the state for reimbursement, and then they would reimburse us with that money. By far, the largest portion of money that was reimbursed to us was for first responder salaries. So that was the police department, the fire and ambulance, and dispatch. Now, the dispatch money that came back, we did split with the county because the county funds half of dispatch, so they got half of the CARES Act money back as well. So when that money comes back, the state has said you've already spent this money on a CARES Act related item. We will reimburse you. That money then goes into the general fund and it can be used for any item. So from a legality point of view, the money that comes back to us can be spent on absolutely anything. Now, why was it a good idea to spend that on a building? That's a really good question, and we'll touch on some of the items. If you saw some of the very first times we were looking at this, one of the things we did was line up what we were spending against the city strategic plan, and the purchase of the building hit I think 5 or 6 um, parts of the strategic plan that were important. One was just better service to the community. Right now, all of these um, offices are spread across the city. In fact, we'll be taking people from 4 separate offices to combine into the new building. So before, if you had to get something approved by the planning department, but then you wanted to pay for a business license, those were in 2 separate buildings. Or if you had a legal question and a planning question, those were also in 2 separate buildings. Now, all of that will be in one location to hopefully better serve the community. So it will make it more efficient for is one item. The second item is it actually will increase security as far as the city employees go. Having very disparate locations where people aren't together and without a lot of uh, I'd say mutual support is not an ideal situation. The new building is much better as a setup for security. It will be able to control entry and exit much better than most of the current facilities. Additional reason is because we actually save quite a bit of money in the long run by purchasing a building. A lot of people don't know that the current finance office is leased. It is not owned by the city. So the city is spending over $35,000, no, 20 over $25,000. We're spending about $26,000 a year just to lease the facility. That is money that we won't have to spend anymore, which is a great savings for us. And then that money can then go towards whatever it's needed. Um, so not only security, better service to the public. It does save us money in the long run. It also can help us meet some of our goals as far as alternative energy goes, as far as renewables. If we were to place a solar panel on the new building, which is one of the issues that we'd like to do, it will actually provide estimates are, at least, it would provide all the electrical needs for that building year round. So we additionally save the money on the electrical consumption, plus we would take that amount of electricity off the grid that would have to be produced by other means. It would be produced with solar. So those were some of the environmental goals from the strategic plan that it would meet. Finally, and this is probably one of the the more important reasons, is that that building is currently the only place where the state services reside. It used to have more state services. Right now it's Child and Family Services, but it used to be the Office of Public Assistance as well as the Job Service Office. Uh, in purchasing the building, we can help protect that space for the state services that the community really needs. One, we can control what they have to spend to stay in the city of Livingston, but we also might be able to leverage that into bringing back some more state services by reducing the cost to the state to have it here in Livingston. That probably isn't going to be full time, but we might be able to start negotiating for some of the services that we lost to come back part time, because we can now use that space to save the state money, and convince them that they should bring back some services in response to that money savings. So that's kind of an overview of the at least the broad topics of why the purchase of the building was a pretty good priority for the city, and I think also provides really good service to the community and meets both sets of goals. Um, the next two questions, I'm going to combine two. They are, why was the CARES Act money not considered for Green Acres to offset SIDs? And where are you with grants for the Green Acres SIDs? Those two questions are related. One of the reasons we didn't look to use the CARES Act to offset any specific SIDs, whether it was Green Acres or anywhere else in the city on other SIDs, is because those are specific projects for specific areas, and we really wanted to use the money for more globally applicable items. So something that would help benefit the entire city and not just one neighborhood or one section of the city. Uh, at the same time, we have already applied for a Treasure State Endowment Program, or TSEP grant, for the sewer system in Green Acres, and that application has been, I think, for about a month, or maybe a couple weeks. I'm not sure, but we're waiting to hear back. It'll probably be a few months before we hear back on whether or not that will be approved. And that could save the property owners in Green Acres quite a bit of money as far as it goes on the sewer system. Okay, next question. What exactly does an enforcement officer do? I noticed lots of abandoned cars, junk piles by people's houses, and garbage all over town. So that's a great question. We can talk a little bit about what the code enforcement officer does, as well as some of the reasons you may not have seen as much in that area as you would like to lately. In general, the code enforcement officer deals with a lot of issues, and they're pretty wide-ranging issues across the city. So traffic tickets is one of them for parking violations, whether that's 2-hour parking or no parking zones, or inappropriate use of handicap zones is one issue, as well as trailers on the street beyond the maximum, abandoned cars on the streets, and some of the blight issues or that you might see around town. So it's fairly wide encompassing and is the entire city. So it's a fairly large job for one person. While the rest of the police department does help with that, and as well as the planning department are the people that see things, a lot of our enforcement is still based off of complaint. Um, and when you get to abandoned vehicles, that's a little trickier depending on whether or not it's on the street. If it's on the street, it's easier. If we can see that it's clearly non-functional or it's not licensed, then we can ticket it and eventually tow it. If it's on private property, that's a different question, because there's no requirement for a vehicle to be operational, to be sitting in someone's driveway or even in their lawn. Then it becomes a longer term solution. So some of the things we're doing, just let me cover since October on code enforcement. Because we had some COVID losses in the police force, as far as people being off shift for either quarantining or actually having COVID, the code enforcement officer was required to basically come off of code enforcement for a while to fill our normal patrol shifts. So there was about a month where there was not much code enforcement being done because the officer had to fill regular patrol shifts instead. But starting in early December, we were able to come back to enforce some of the code enforcements. So the first week in December, we started passing out warnings to remind people that we're still there and we're still enforcing the 2 hour parking. And then since about this, after the first week, we've been enforcing 2 to 3 days a week, 3 or 4 hours a day. Since early October and December 17th, we've issued about 225 parking citations, mostly for 2 hour parking violations downtown. There were some in residential areas for parking in yellows or vehicles left on the street that weren't in running condition. Um, we also addressed approximately 20 abandoned vehicles. Um, what you don't see is that most abandoned vehicles are moved by the owners, and so we don't actually tow them. So we actually had 20 vehicles that were moved by the owner, and then there were 3 more vehicles that were towed to our impound lot for being abandoned on the streets. And we have identified about 12 properties in the city right now that we're working on as far as urban decay issues go. Um, but those all require coordination through the attorney's office. The Because of private property rights, it takes a much more concerted effort to actually get anything changed in on a residence than it would say a car on the street. Um, so there's a jumping question on code enforcement officer. It says it seems to be targeting downtown. Um, Business owners and shoppers are not who we want to ticket. If that's true, then we should lobby the city commission to remove the 2 hour parking restriction. Um, as it currently stands, it's 2 hour parking Monday through Saturday. If we don't want it to be 2 hour parking, then that's an easy change at the commission level. And if business owners would like that to change, that's something that they should bring up either to my office, which is great, or they can bring it directly to their city commissioners, and we can remove the 2 hour parking restrictions. I'm not sure if that's what they want, but if it is, that is absolutely something that you can push for and you can ask for. And I think the restrictions are really in place for the business owners. So if they do not want them, then we probably could absolutely remove them, and that would remove some of the burden off of the code enforcement officer as well. So that's absolutely something, if you think it is desired by the downtown business owners, that should be brought to the commission. Um, okay, so here's a few more questions. When are the city offices going to open back up? So if if you did not if you not know the city offices are currently closed, they are sort of, they're open for appointment only. What we're trying to do right now is just minimize the amount of public traffic in and out at the same time. So we are taking appointments, and we will do Zoom sessions with people if they want to call in, or we'll meet people in the parking lots if they don't feel comfortable coming into the building. So while the city offices aren't open to the public, they are available for you to access the staff, myself, city attorney, finance. Just call in, set up an appointment, and we will try to accommodate you as best we can. When they're actually going to open fully to the public is probably a question that's not going to be answered for a while. Um, we'll go through with the county and with the health department and decide when we think that risk is at an appropriate level. Another question I get asked a lot is, why is the county open and the city is not? There's nothing from the city that is specifically time sensitive for you to be able to pick up. The county still has motor vehicle department, which is important to have open, um, health department, and some of the court areas. City court is still functioning, but in general, we look at what the community needs from the city, and almost all that can be done either through the mail, over the phone, or online. And so right now, that's the safest way to accomplish those business transactions, and that's what we'll continue to do until we think the risk is low enough to open back up fully to the public. Um, is there going to be a parade in 2020? That's a great question. I don't know. That is put on by the chamber, and they make the choice on whether or not they should run it. There will be some interaction with the city as far as street closures and that go, but right now, we certainly would love to see a parade because parades are great and everybody loves a parade. Uh, if there is a parade, what's the route going to be? Again, the route is requested, but it would not go down Park Street still if that's where we're headed. Why did sewer rates go up? I love that question because it actually lets me um, answer something I think is widely misunderstood. The answer is sewer rates didn't go up. Sewer rates haven't changed at all. Your bill may have changed, um, and the reason that is because we've changed the way we bill the rate. So the rate's the same, but how we bill it has changed slightly. Uh, Currently, or not currently, under the old system, the way that most of you are probably used to, the your water use, because we don't meter sewer itself, so all sewer charges are based off of water usage. Your water usage for December, January, and February were averaged, and then in March you would be charged that average for sewer, and that would go through the next February, and then the following March your new average for December, January, and February would be calculated, and you would start with that. What this led to was a lot of problems with people that either weren't in town during those months because they are snowbirds or they hadn't bought that property yet, so it was hard to establish an average, or people that had a leak and their average was skewed with it. Um, so there were a lot of exceptions and there were a lot of rules. It was taking a lot of time um, to for city staff to actually administer. So we asked what's the purpose of using the average, and going back and doing the research, the purpose was really to not charge people for water usage in the summer that wasn't going into the sewer system. So what kind of water usage doesn't go into the sewer system? That's if you're watering your flowers, if you're watering your lawn, if you're washing your car, mainly those summer activities where you're using water outside that doesn't come back into the sewer system. So it makes sense to use a different billing system in the summer than the winter because you're using your water differently. So what we did is we changed it now to being actual use. So you'll be billed off your water usage for the winter months. And I think that starts in November through March. Uh, Double check me on the months. It's we sent you a letter on it. Oh, and there's a fact page on the website, so please go get the exact dates there. But we just started that billing now based off your actual usage. So if your bill went down this month, it's because you use less water than your average. If your bill went up, it was because you used more water than your old average. We are still going to average, but now instead of averaging over those 3 months, we'll average over the 6 month period, and then that average will be used during the summer months. During the winter months, you'll always be charged for your actual usage of water. During the summer months, you'll be charged either your average, and there's a minimum average of 3,000 gallons because that's the average across the city, and that covers people who either the house wasn't built or were gone for the entire period and don't have a usage. So the 3,000 would be the base usage. But if your actual use is below your average, we'll charge you for actual use. So we're trying to make it as fair as possible, because what happens if you are charging people who aren't here in the winter less for their sewer than people who live here all year round, you're basically penalized for living here all year round. We try to make it as fair as possible so that everyone is paying as close to their fair share as we could make it. So that is how the sewer is working. Um, where are we with the new crossing? All right, crossing is a great topic. Everybody loves to talk about a new crossing. Where we are is the commission decided last year before the election that we would put it on hold until after the growth policy, and then hopefully get it on the ballot for next November. So that's still the plan. The growth policy, because of COVID and some other reasons, is getting pushed further than we would like it to. So we're going to have to reevaluate whether we can wait for the end of the growth policy before we go ahead with some public meetings for the crossing. But in general, if everything is on target, we will have that on the November ballot if the commission so decides. Excuse me. All right. What other areas does the city plan to annex? So, in general, the city is only looking to annex areas that are as much as you can say in the city. There are already areas that are surrounded by the city and are operate within the city um, as if they were part of the city. So we call them the holes. They're places that didn't get annexed for one reason or another. We've already done some of those. Mayor's Landing was one of them, so that the city park is actually in the city is a nice touch. So now we can actually enforce city laws in the city park. Um, Additionally, there's actually one or several residences where there's only one or two residences that are county holes in the middle of the city. So those are the areas we're looking at as far as annexation goes. Right now, we are not looking to annex any more territory on the outer limits of the city. Um, there might be one or two exceptions for that for small areas that are looking for specific uses. But in general, the city's not looking to expand out as far as annexation goes. Really, just to fill in. One of the areas that we are looking to fill in is some of the railroad property that is not in the city. Well, we don't produce a lot of taxes from that because they get assessed centrally with the state. It does allow both uh, fire response from Livingston Fire and Rescue, so that burns not on rural count or the rural District One, and as well as police enforcement if there's issues in that area. That way, there's no jurisdiction problems. Either the Livingston Police Department or Park County Sheriff can respond to those areas if they're in the city. All right. Um, if the city has economic means to hire another staff member, what positions are next in line? So that is a really complicated question because there's a lot of needs in the city right now as far as staff goes, because of the increased demand that we're seeing. Um, so there's several areas we're looking at. How it plays out is going to be determined a little bit by what demand looks like. We just hired, for those of you that haven't met Matthew, Matthew Menard is our deputy planning director. Planning was an area that absolutely needed to be beefed up just because of the amount of development that's being looked at and the desires of the community to really be able to meaningfully um, affect that growth or control that growth or influence that growth into something that we want as a community. So that was an area that we already addressed. Um, Likewise, building is an area that is behind right now because of the amount of construction that's going on in the community. Um, it is there's a lot of inspections that need to happen. If you look at just the amount of building that's going on at Eagles Landing, the new bank, the Brookstone new subdivision there, Northtown with the new construction that will start up there, that's a lot of building inspections, building permits, everything along that line that needs to be um, that well we need to do the administration for. So building is absolutely an area we need to look at as far as city staff goes. The public and the commission have looked or have requested that we look at how do we fit a social worker into our first responder hierarchy. So that's another area that's being researched right now. We'll have to come up with a model for that and what that looks like, and then figure out what the cost is and how the funding is. Looking at current models around the state, Bozeman does a kind of on-call model. It's actually Gallatin County, and they do it for about 100,000 a year. Missoula does more of a crisis response team model where they have two teams that can respond during weekdays during certain hours, and that costs about $500,000 a year. So it can get pretty spendy, and so we'll have to go through and figure out what makes sense for Livingston, especially in terms of what other organizations are here and um, what can they provide for services and what would it cost for their to provide their services. So broad brush, those are the major areas that we're looking at right now, but those can change just with um, just depends on service requirements. If we change our current civic center, if we get like a wellness center, then obviously the rec department would have to be beefed up as far as staff goes. So there's a lot to that, and we look at it each year. Well, we look at it all year long, really, but we make those decisions each budget year. Which budget for FY22 we will start developing probably in the next 2 weeks or shortly after the new year. So we're pretty much always in a budget cycle. Let's see for next question. Um, who at the city is taking lead on the trails and active transportation plan? That will probably be a joint effort between planning and public works, depending on what area we're looking at. Will depend on which one of those is leading that particular aspect of it. Obviously, planning as far as how to hook into the rest of the systems. Public works more from how we're going to get it built, and both are very important. Um, when will the city determine who will be on the trail and active transportation steering committee and what would their role be? We probably haven't gotten far enough to give you a good answer on that. We do have an RFP out for a contractor to come in and help write the plan. Um, we haven't figured out what kind of administrative structure we want to put around that yet. So that's something that will be decided in the future. Who did the city meet with to help put together the future land use map and the draft growth policy? Um, excuse me, there's a lot of talking. So I don't know if we had specific meetings on the land use map. Obviously, we talked um, with the contractor. We talked to the planning department. Uh, we researched all of the both city and county products that were out there, including the current or old, depending on how you want to look at it, city growth policy as well as the county growth policy. Um, we talked to developers, real estate agents, and that's probably a good spot to say what's the purpose of the future land use map. For those of you that haven't been following along with the growth policy, um, the future land use map isn't a desired place where the city wants to expand or grow or necessarily use land in the future. What it is, and we can probably work in the growth policy to make this clearer, is really where we expect there to be development pressure. So it's areas where it's contiguous with the city. It's easier than other areas to extend sewer, water, and transportation networks. Um, are closer to downtown or closer to other development that um, makes it easy for developers to come in and build. And so there are areas that we've identified where we're like, this would be if you were a developer, this is where you would want to come in and build. So there are areas that we expect to receive growth pressure. Why is that important? For a couple of reasons. One, it means we have to really plan for those areas and understand how growth there would affect the rest of the city. But we also, when we do things like size water mains, size sewer mains, build streets, that we build infrastructure that could handle potential growth out there. It doesn't mean that it will grow. It doesn't mean that we want it to grow. It doesn't mean that we've approved it to grow. It just means that we would be wise to plan for growth in that area so that we could accommodate it if it happens and was approved through the commissions. So um, that was probably a long question to who did we talk to? Ooh, we're almost four more questions on the pre-said list, and then we'll go to uh, the comment section and see what else you have. Um, as a city manager, what has been the most difficult part of your job? What has been the most surprising? All right, so now we're in like the job interview portion of this. Um, the most difficult part of being a city manager is trying to balance all of the varied priorities and needs and requests from across the community. Uh, there are often times that there's not a consensus on which way the city wants to go with something. And by the city, I mean which way the community wants city staff to go with something. So trying to balance all of those competing interests from those that have given the city input, from those who have not given the city input, because not everyone. And I've lived in a lot of cities, and I know I couldn't name one city manager from any of those cities. So not everyone's just dialed in on city government and what we're doing and why we're doing it. So when we make decisions, we try to look at not only the people that are, passionate about what's going on, but also those that may not be as aware of what's happening in the city. You don't want those people left out. You want them to be represented as well. So it's very difficult to try and figure out what the right balance is, and most daily decisions are balancing one priority against another. Often we have competing priorities that people adamantly believe in. Sometimes the same people adamantly believe in the two competing priorities. So that's probably the most difficult part, is trying to come up with solutions that meet everyone's needs. Um, and as much as you can meet everyone's desires. So that's a very difficult aspect of it. What has been the most surprising? Um, what's been the most surprising thing? I think the most surprising thing, at least for Livingston, is how involved the community is. This is a very involved community, much more so than the average community you lived in. And I've lived in 20, 25 different communities. I don't know if any of them have been as involved as the Livingston community. So that's surprising, not in a bad way. In fact, I think it's a great thing that people are involved in what's going on in the city. But it is different than a lot of other places that you will live. People really care about what's going on, and they really want to make sure their voices are heard and that they are represented in the outcomes in the city. That's probably also why it makes it so difficult, is because there are so many people with different ideas that want to be represented in the outcomes. So that was hopefully a good enough answer for you. As a city manager, what do you do really well? What aspects of your role do you think you need to work on? Um, I think if I was going to tell you one thing that I do very well, it's get things done. I will get if you have a project and you need to get it done, we will get it done. And I think the city has reflected that over the past 2 to 4 years of accomplishing a ton. Um, you may not have always liked everything that was accomplished, but we have gotten just a lot done, from the wastewater treatment plant to the downtown reconstructions to revamping the way a lot of the staff works. Um, we've updated just a ton of the code uh, through a different through all different aspects of the code, from planning and zoning to um, traffic, snow removal. I mean, we've done a lot. So I think if I had an absolute strength, it's that if you want things to get done, I will get them done. Um, what thing do we need to work on? Um, Honestly, I think most people could use work on this, but for me, I think because as we talked before about how many people are involved, communication is super hard. There are so many entities that are interested in what's going on. It's hard to effectively communicate with all of them. There's internal communication between the different departments, then the city commission, sometimes with the county commission, county boards or county departments, and then the different entities within the community. And we have a lot of entities in the community, and they're all very interested in what's going on. Business community, healthcare world, the nonprofit section is extensive in Livingston. So there are a lot of people to communicate with. And so we are attempting to try new things to improve that. We have email lists. If you haven't signed up for them, please go to my page on the website and you can sign up for listservs, basically for different topics, and we will send you emails when those things are going on. This Facebook Live um, session is an attempt to improve that, to just get some information out, allow you to ask questions that might be harder to ask in a more formal setting of a commission meeting or a different board meeting. This is a little more informal, and so that's an attempt at it. So I will continue to try and improve on that, and we'll see. You can grade me and you can tell me if I'm getting better or not. What is the one thing you know your municipality needs to improve on, and what is the best thing that can be duplicated or built on? I think the best thing is you have an incredibly dedicated set of city employees. The city workers do a ton, and they do way more than they're actually required to do. Um, you may or may not see it, but almost everyone goes beyond what's actually in their job description on a daily basis to get things done around the city. Whether that's the public works department, that I've stood with with those guys around a hole in the street, and it's 15 below, and they're standing in a foot of water, and they're out there repairing the water main so that you can have water. It was so cold one night out there that the propane heater actually froze, and they couldn't have a heater because that's how cold it was. And they're out there working on water mains to get that out to you. Whether it's the rec department that has come up with some of the most creative ways for people to participate in events around the city, from the bear hunt they did to, I mean, just there's just a list longer than I can name of really fun events that they put on for the community, especially for the youth. Um, it goes all the way from the finance department that's there to answer your questions on utility billings, the legal department, let alone Livingston Fire and Rescue and the police department. Everybody is out there. If you haven't seen some of the charitable things that they're currently engaged in, get out to the LFR and the LPD Facebook pages and see what they're accomplishing for the community because it's really great. That's what can be built on. Um, what's what does the municipality, thanks for that word, need to improve on is I think probably long-term planning. We are starting that, and I think it's getting much better. Certainly better than it was 5 or 10 years ago. But we are really trying to change the way we look at projects. If we're looking at something, we don't want it to be a 5-year project or a 10-year project. We want it to be a 50-year project, 75-year project, a 100-year project, and actually try to consider, even though it's difficult, try to consider what the implications are for this project 100 years down the road. I mean, we are living with infrastructure that was built 100 years ago. And there are times you can see they didn't think about, and they couldn't have obviously predicted where we'd be, but didn't necessarily think about what effect that would have in the future. So we are trying to really improve on how we do long-term planning. One, to save money so that we don't have to redo projects, but two, just to have a really well-designed and really built city that provides the services to the community efficiently. All right. Last question that was pre-sent to us. What qualities or aspects of Livingston inspire you the most to do your job well? Um, I don't think there's anybody that lives in or around Livingston, or probably most of Montana, that isn't inspired by the natural beauty around us. I mean, it's just a gorgeous place to live. And if you take the time daily to look at that, it is inspiring. But honestly, that's probably the most inspiring thing. But the thing I like the most, um, I am a Iowa farm boy. I grew up in a super small town, 600 people, and I actually grew up about 6 miles outside of a town of 600 people. So I love the small town feel to Livingston. It's how I grew up. It's what I like. I like that I can throw my kids on their bike and they can ride to soccer or they can ride to the pool because it's a small community and that's the way it works. And people look out for each other. So I think if we can maintain that feel as we grow or don't grow, um, that's what inspires me to try and make it a really great city, at least from the city government perspective, because that's the only influence I really have is how well does the city government run, and so that's what we try and do. All right, I'm gonna take a quick drink, and then Faith is gonna look through the questions online and see what else we have, and then we'll answer any more. All right.
So,
Um,
let me see the chat. Um, Kelly asked if you would talk about issuing road passes for parking downtown.
okay, I'm gonna scroll through some of these and see if I can hit as I'm going. So excuse me while I read. So can we talk about a yearly pass or something for local businesses for parking? Um, yes, you can absolutely bring that to your commission. It's going to have to be an ordinance change, so it's going to have to go in front of the commission. Um, and I honestly, to be really effective with it, get as many businesses as you can together and come up with your ideas and what you'd like it to be. Whether you do that through the chamber, whether you do that through the LBID, since it's more downtown specific. Um, but get out there, talk with your neighbors and your peers in the business world, and see what you would like. The commission can change the ordinance to read anything that's legal under state law. So um, if you have any ideas like that, please submit them. We would be happy to review them.
The next question is Becca asking if you can please address how prudent ethical it is for commissioners to vote for authorize a major expenditure like that.
Okay.
For Livingston's total.
So this is another question on the CARES Act funding in the city building. And the question is, can you address how it's prudent or ethical for commissioners to vote for authorize a major expenditure like that before Livingston's total amount of CARES Act funding was actually finalized? Um, so CARES Act funding will never actually be finalized until the program totally runs out. It's not like there was a certain amount set aside. It would depend on what we would put back for um, reimbursement. So there could still be more money out there. And the state had pretty much said this is what you're going to get, and they had been consistent for several months until they changed their mind. So there wasn't like a finalization date where the state said, "Yep, this is what you get. This is it." it was an ongoing process, and it probably will be an ongoing process. My guess is that the funding package that's currently moving through Congress in Washington D.C. there will probably be more stimulus money, and it depends on where it comes to. Uh, and when we talk about CARES Act money, I want to make sure everyone knows CARES Act money did not just come to the city. The county has gotten about the same amount as the city. In fact, they got more in certain areas. Um, Local businesses have gotten a lot of business stabilization grants through the CARES Act money. Uh, the hospitals have gotten money. The schools have gotten money. Um, Nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits have gotten money. Some directly related to CARES Act money, such as the Food Resource Center, and there's also other programs that were for daycare or after school care. So there's um, uh, several entities in town that got money for that, and some of these were $100,000 grants. Schools were more in the half a million side. Obviously, the county's gotten well over a million. Um, so it's going to be an ongoing process, and we're going to have to work across the board with all the organizations, both governmental and non-governmental, to try and figure out the best use for the money. So absolutely, the money has gone into the general fund. So the commission absolutely had all authority and really some prudence to spend the money uh, in a way that helped the city as much as possible to serve the community. People can disagree on what that is, and I totally respect that. But they certainly had the right and the authority and some responsibility to get that done. People sometimes want to ask about how much of the money has to be spent by a certain date. We still have to be below a 50% reserve in the general fund by the 1st of June. So there is a timeline on some of the money. Now, if the commission wants to spend beyond that 50% reserve and take the reserve lower than that, they certainly can, and there won't be a timeline on that money. It's just part of the reserve, and the commission can serve it, can spend it as they see fit. So I think that hits most of it. Um,
So the next question is from Lauren. As a local restaurant owner, I feel the city has abandoned the industry during the COVID
Okay, so
pandemic.
here's a question from a local restaurant owner that feels abandoned during the COVID pandemic. The health department has not had the resources. I skipped it. Has not had the resources to help and be proactive. How come the city didn't do anything to help? Um, so what has the city done to help? So the city, one, doesn't fund the health department. That is done through the county. We actually don't. The only interaction we have with the health department, not the health board, but the health department, is we do help fund one of the sanitarian positions to do inspections inside the city as far as health inspections go. So I know the health department itself got about 150,000 in COVID money, and I know the county got about 180,000 in housing assistance money. And there's some other money spread out there. So as far as funding goes, that's where the funding sources were. As far as what the city did, um, I think the best program, and I don't know if you've been able to partake of it or know of it, is we changed the way we allowed the Park Development Corporation to administer the city's um, Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, revolving loan fund. And so, if you are a business owner and you need a loan to keep operating or to meet payroll or whatever else it is that you may need, we greatly reduce the restrictions on that money, and it is available to local business owners. So, if you have not talked to the Park Development Corporation, please do. See if you can take advantage of that. There's a significant amount of money available. I think in somewhere in the realm of $500,000 that could be loaned out. Um, Outside of that, it's very difficult for the city to do direct aid to businesses, which is what the state was doing. Um, and so those were the business stabilization loans that came from the state. They kind of filled that role, and the city did not. Um, but we did make those other resources available. Also, if there's other items that you would like from the city, I know some areas have blocked off parking and made it available for outside dining. The city's more than happy to work with you on that. We just need to know what would be useful. Because I know some businesses would probably like outside dining. Other businesses probably would not like the parking blocked off. But we're more than happy to open any other suggestions on things we can do to help. Um,
Next question: is there any possibility of adding a parking garage downtown?
is there a possibility of adding a parking garage downtown? Anything's possible.
Or slightly away from downtown?
Unfortunately, the cost of that is significant. Right now, I think, and this is a rough estimate, do not hold me to this. I think it's $20,000 a parking space to build that kind of garage. Um, we'd also have to get the the land available to build it, and there may be some areas that would work, but all of them are privately owned. So the city would have to buy the property and then build the parking garage. It'd be a super expensive endeavor. Um, that being said, it's absolutely a possibility. We just have to figure out where the money would come from, and then we would have to figure out uh, the logistics of actually making it happen. But it is really expensive, especially we especially once you start going up, and there probably aren't a lot of spaces big enough to maintain a huge footprint. So it would have to be a multi-level structure.
Next question: can you explain why the state took back almost $500,000 of CARES funds and how it affects us?
So why did the state take back a half a million in CARES funds and how it affects us? So what they did was they had allocated out of their 1.25 billion, 300 million for local municipalities. And what they did was take back 100 million of that. So it wasn't anything Livingston specific, but the governor decided, and I think it was an act of the governor, I don't think the legislature was involved, to pull back 100 million and then make that 100 million available to enhanced enhanced unemployment benefits and um, direct aid to businesses. So honestly, that half a million that was pulled back from the city of Livingston, and it wasn't quite half a million, it was like 446,000, will go to unemployment and enhanced aid to businesses. So if you have a local business and you have not received any grants, please look at those programs from the state. That's where the money's going. And if you can avail yourself of those programs, if you need help with that, we would be happy to help you out, see if we can hook you up with the right people. But that is where that money is going. It's still available to people. It's just available in a different venue from the state instead of through the city.
Next question: will the rec center question study be decided or perhaps placed on the November ballot?
Okay, so the question is, will the rec center be decided or perhaps placed on the November ballot? The answer to that is we don't know yet. We have gone through several iterations of community meetings and trying to figure out what people want, and I think we're really starting to narrow in on what people desire for that kind of facility. Um, Construction is still very expensive, so really we're in the phase of trying to figure out how to pay for construction. If we do figure out how to pay for construction, a ballot initiative will probably be for maintenance and operation. It won't be for construction. The goal is to see if we can fund construction almost completely through philanthropic donations. And if we can achieve that, I think we can then move forward and get to um, a, a ballot initiative for maintaining and running it as far as operations go. So if you start seeing movements out there for raising funds to get the construction costs done, get out there and support them. See who you can find to donate to that kind of cause, and that's really how it's going to move forward. So that's probably where we are on that, is trying to determine how much we could raise and then figuring out how to run through that kind of capital campaign.
Where is the city at with a West Side Bridge Northwest subdivision?
So a follow-up question on the crossing, which we discussed a little bit. So short answer is, in the next 6 months, the commission will decide whether or not to put that on the ballot. There's not any more. We aren't doing it the way we did the last time. So the last Star Road crossing, when they did it, the city went out and got the money to do the engineering study without actually um, ensuring that we would have the funds to do the construction. So we got the funds to do the engineering, but then once the engineering was done, there was no money to actually build the crossing. So we're going to do it a little differently this time, and those two pieces will be one. We'll have an idea of what we're going to do, and then we will, in one mill levy, fund both the engineering and the construction, so we don't just waste the money on um, an engineering study that can't be used because there's no money for construction. A question on where will the rec center be located at this stage? Any chance it could go on the north side? Um, it could go on the north side. There's some significant drawbacks to that. Uh, the main one being how people would be able to access it that don't have cars. So think mainly kids out of school. That's why the current Civic Center is such a great location. Almost all your middle school, high school, uh, schools are within walking distance of it, and that's something we'd really like to maintain, just because it gives great access to both school kids and any other community members in the downtown area that may not have transportation. While wherever we put it, we will work to get alternative transportation there, such as a wind rider. Um, Having it downtown is much easier for most people to access it. It also does not put additional traffic across the crossing, which is an issue that we have to consider as well, is we don't want to increase any traffic problems that we have from the limited crossings right now. But I think probably the biggest reason that it wouldn't go on the north side is the city doesn't own any property up there that it could go on. And adding the cost of buying property to the cost of the project will probably be prohibitive. It will be much easier to complete the project if we place it on property that's already owned by the city. So is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? I would say no. Um, I think it's probably a better solution to have it more in the core of the city, where we have that dense downtown area and on property that the city already owns. Could you explain what is the strategic plan and how it worked? Sure. So, 2 years ago now, is that right? Yes, the city created its first strategic plan. So, the strategic plan, if you look in the hierarchy of city documents, is an overarching goal for what we want to accomplish. So, it runs on a 4 year period. Our current one, a 5 year period, excuse me. Our current one from 2019 when we approved it to 2024. And it lists specific things that we would like to get done in that time frame. And so basically, it's an easy way for the commission to communicate their priorities to me as the city manager, and then I can communicate them down to the rest of the city staff. Um, if you haven't looked at it, I encourage you to do so. Well, what we also do is those specific projects or goals are listed, and we give updates as we progress through them. Sometimes the update is this failed miserably, and we're gonna have to start over. Sometimes the update is, hey, this is done and it's working great. And sometimes it's just where we are in the process. We tried to put dates assigned to them so you can kind of get a feel for the timeline with all the different projects. It is a living document. It changes a lot. Um, I try to update it as much as I can. My goal is once a month. I don't always make it. But you can see a lot of what the city's trying to do if you look in the strategic plan. So as we go forward with some other documents, as the growth policy is completed, those goals and strategies will make their way into the strategic plan when they're basically in a 5 year horizon. So if you think we can accomplish them in 5 years. So what does that mean? We can accomplish them. One, we can fund it if it requires money, and two, we have the staff or the materials, resources necessary to get it done. Um, they're not listed out in priorities. Uh, while there are ones we'd like to do more than others, really the goal is to get as much done as possible. So if there's a lower priority, although we don't give it a priority, but something you would consider a lower priority, that we have the resources and the money, the time, and the staff to get accomplished, we'll do it. And that way it's done. And we'll mark it off the list, and that's something else we can move on to while we continue to pursue the resources for the other um, the other goals that we may not be able to meet right now. So that's a quick overview of the strategic plan. If you haven't read it, get out there and grab it. The goal for the commission is to update it once a year. We've been working on a draft. We haven't approved the final for this year yet. The reason we do that is because a lot of times priorities change. I mean, obviously, COVID was not anticipated. So if that really changes any of the strategic plan goals, the commission can update those, and then I have new direction, and I head in a new way to accomplish new things. Would it be cost effective to put a police fire substation on the north side to alleviate any safety issues until underpass is decided? Um, Not currently, just because you would need two crews. So you would double the cost of um, not so much police, but on the fire side, you would double the cost of personnel because you would need a crew on manning that station and a crew manning this station. Um, that being said, in general, we do not really have any issues with the fire department or the police department getting to the north side. Even if there's a train across the tracks and there's some flooding in the uh, underpass, the the fire department has, well, and dispatch, we have procedures to help handle that. One, we have a direct line to MRL, and we can let them know that emergency vehicles need to get off or get through the crossing, and they will clear any at-grade crossings for us. But additionally, even at the worst flooding in the underpass, our vehicles, because they're high profile, can still make it through there. And we have basically emergency plans with the police department where they would um, clear that area of traffic so that then the emergency responders could get through. So we solved that problem more with some um, operational plans that would help in those situations. Um, but in general, the cost of having a second station would be pretty high. I think we spend a little over $1 million in personnel costs for the fire department, and you could look at it'd be pretty close to doubling that. Probably not exactly, probably more, 75% more, but it'd be pretty expensive. Um, where does the city see increasing tourism to Livingston in the list of priorities? Does the city have any specific plans to increase tourism? So the city supports, I would say, bringing tourism to Livingston in a few different ways, but usually not directly. One of the reasons, or one of the ways we support it, is by the creation of the Business Improvement District. That was created by the commission to help the downtown businesses, as well as the creation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which does market um, Livingston locally, statewide, and nationwide and internationally. Um, the city commission created the CVB so that we could use specific funds from the state tourism office to promote Livingston specifically. So that was a creation by the city to bring that money into Livingston directly to promote it specifically versus a more general state promotion. Um, the same kind of goes for the Tourism Business Improvement District that the City Commission created. That is a group of hoteliers that band together to do the same kind of marketing, except that marketing is specifically focused on, as they would call it, heads and beds, bringing people in to stay in the hotels. For and that can include all kinds of different events, and they do a good job of supporting local events as well. And I think probably um, the most direct way that the city helps with tourism is to make sure that the infrastructure for tourism is adequate. So the downtown improvement projects, I think, is a big part of that. Making sure that the downtown has inviting streetlights, is sidewalks that people can go up and down and have that freedom of movement. Making sure it was all ADA compatible so that we don't have any issues as far as that goes. Um, Doing things like making sure that the even down to the small details, like making sure that the light posts that we put in had outlets. So when an organization such as the LBID bought the current snowflakes, there's a place to plug them in. So our job is more probably in the background, creating the infrastructure and creating the organizations that can support the tourism, and leaving the specific promotion up to the businesses who know exactly much better than the city how they want to bring business in and how they want to see that kind of money spent.
What is the city doing to address housing shortage? What does the city consider affordable housing?
All right, so The next question is on housing and how the city is addressing it and what do we consider affordable housing. Um, Affordable housing is a nebulous term that probably means something different to everyone. There are specific definitions that are based on percentage of um, average household income, but the ways that the city is involved in housing, and there's several. One is through the growth policy and figuring out better ways to zone, to allow, um, and to make it profitable for developers to build the kind of housing that people need. So that's going to go through the planning department and the zoning commission. Um, Additionally, we work with nonprofits that do housing. Whether that's donations to HRDC for the warming center for the segment of the population that is currently homeless, or we actually rewrote some zoning code to allow HRDC to build a small community up on the north side near the water tanks to support Blue Bunch Flats. When they were applying for money, the city actually signed on as a sponsor for that. We currently helped the developers that are working on the main hotel to apply for and eventually get a grant for architectural work, plans on how to revamp the main hotel to make that available for housing. Additionally, part of the use of the CARES Act funds or the reimbursement for CARES Act spent money was 50,000 to the Park County Housing Coalition to complete a housing inventory and to work on a housing action plan. So those are the main items that we've done in the past. Obviously, the city of Livingston does not have a housing department. We don't have staff dedicated to that, and honestly, we just don't have the tax base to create that kind of department. So most of it is in how we support outside agencies in the work that they're doing. HRDC, Homeward, any other affordable housing, workforce housing, attainable housing, whatever term you would like to use, we're behind those efforts. Um,
We're planning to encourage residents to vacate streets on specific dates to make the street sweeper more effective.
all right, how are we going to encourage residents to vacate streets on specific dates to make the street sweeper more efficient? Um, we will continue to try and communicate, so you'll get the schedules online. You can see it. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have the staff to put out and move signs. That's actually pretty labor intensive. Uh, we could do that if we did it less often, but we can't do it and maintain the amount of street sweeping we're currently doing. Unfortunately, the probably most effective way for the city to encourage residents to vacate streets is ticketing, and we have increased those efforts. So please move your car so you don't get a ticket on the day the street sweeper comes through. Um, that is probably the most efficient and most effective thing that we actually do. Can you explain the logic of how the streets get plowed? Sure. So this is a great question because people have a lot of questions on the snow routes and how it works and when do we plow and when do we don't plow. Um, in general, the city plows the snow routes on days that it snows. If you don't know where the snow routes are, that map is also available online. Go take a peek at it. And some people question things like, well, why is River Drive a snow route? Nobody lives on it. And the answer to that is it's a snow route because nobody lives on it. Um, when we plow the city streets, the main city streets, we do not have the manpower or the equipment to remove the berms. So if it's a significant amount of snow, we are going to plow in the vast majority of residents who are parked on the street. It makes it really hard for them to get out. It makes it super hard for people to scoop their driveways. So in the long run, and we're actually just having some of these conversations with people on a snow route who would like to be removed from the snow route because they have found that plowing the street actually makes it more difficult to get around than not plowing the street. A lot of that is also due to the nature of Livingston and the wind and how quickly things drift after you plow it. So even when you do plow it, if it's a good wind day, it's going to drift right back in pretty quickly. Whereas if you don't have that berm, it doesn't promote the drifting. So there's a lot that goes into the snow plowing. One of the things that people don't often think about is if we remove the snow, so let's say we brought in front end loaders or snow blowers and loaded it up in trucks, we quickly run out of places to put it. Um, it's it's kind of amazing how massive the piles of snow are if you try to remove it from the downtown streets. We do a fairly good job, I think, of getting it off of Main Street and the business area, but even that taxes the available areas we have to put snow. And when you're moving snow, especially in this area, and it ends up close to the Yellowstone, you're going to get the melt and the runoff into the river, which actually isn't very environmentally good for the river either, because of the dirt, grease, salt, or whatever else ends up in that snow. Um, so there's an environmental aspect to it as well. So it's there actually is logic to it, whether you believe it or not. It's just actually a complicated problem, and we're trying to do what we can to make it as easy for as many people as we can. But plowing all the streets would actually probably be less conducive for most people than just maintaining the snow routes.
Besides the bank, what other immediate needs of the community that citizens can help with?
Okay, so outside of the food bank, what are the other immediate needs of the community that the citizens can help with? The Food Resource Center is obviously a great place. Loaves and Fishes is the same way. Um, and that is immediate needs. Um, if you're looking to help that homeless population, look to HRDC and the Warming Center and see if you can see if they're where they are in their annual fundraising for the Warming Center. That's also a fairly expensive endeavor that they try and put on for the people that are here. Um, there's so many good nonprofits in the city. It's really hard to point any of them out. And I think a lot of them are experiencing higher volumes because of COVID and the related things that come with it, whether that's Aspen or even, honestly, even the, the, the animal shelter is seeing a lot of increased um, business. I've been trying to find a rabbit for a while, and they've been out. I think everybody's adopting everything because you're home alone. So that's good, but it takes a lot of effort for all of these organizations to operate. So uh, get out there and find what you're passionate about, and help them out. Whether that's the CASA, whether that's go to the Park County Community Foundation and see the list that they raised for the Give a Hoot campaign. That'll give you an idea of a lot of the nonprofits that are out there and how people are supporting them. But there's a lot. But I think most importantly, make sure your neighbor's okay, whoever that is, especially if they're elderly. Uh, you know, be that small town that I talked about earlier, and just make sure that the people around you are okay. Um, all right, that's it for now. We still got some time left. You guys have other questions? I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, good point, Michael. Absolutely buy some takeout from your local restaurant. Restaurants have been hit hard. If you can support them, please do. Uh,
Buy gift cards.
yeah, if you're looking for good Christmas gift ideas, buy some gift cards, hand them out. Um, that's especially helpful because it's money up front that people will spend later, but it can help restaurants get through these tough times. So, yeah, get out there and support all the local businesses, but especially the restaurants. All right. Any more questions? It's got to be more out there. Um, Let me see if there's any other issues that people are. All right, we don't have any more in the email. Not seeing any more in the chat right now. Um,
Do people want another session?
I will let me give you a couple updates just randomly that you haven't asked about, but I think are neat things out there. Um, for those of you that are worried about air quality in the community, the city has recently installed a couple of air quality sensors. Um, and they're both currently down by the Civic Center. One is indoors and one is outdoors, but we will expand that later. Um, and they're all accessible to you. We wanted to make sure that if you're a soccer coach, if you're a school principal, if you're a healthcare worker, and you want to know the air quality in the city, that you have a way to get it. Just go to purpleair.com, all one word, purpleair.com, and then go to their map. And if you zoom in on Livingston right now, you'll see 3 air sensors. There's a private citizen that has one up that shared that information, so that's great. That's on 10th and Clark. There's an indoor one for the Civic Center, so if you're worried about volleyball or basketball or anything else that's inside, you'll be able to see that. And then there's one that looks like it's in the ballpark. It's actually on the outside of the Civic Center, but I didn't want the two dots to be on top of each other. And so if you're concerned about air quality, the information is there. You can see the instantaneous reading. You can see the historical readings. I think it'll give us a much better idea of what's going on in Livingston as far as air quality goes. And we are working to install another one up on the field house at the soccer fields, and then possibly one more on either the city building, uh, currently the city county building, or the new city building. Um, I've noticed you don't salt or cinder on icy days. Why? Basically, what we do is sand. Um, so you should see our plows out sanding the intersections as far as that goes. Um, and that is the most effective that we found here. Um, not a lot of salt here. That's an East Coast thing, kind of Midwest too. Uh, and we don't, and the state does 89. So if you see any treatments on 89, that's from the state or Highway 10, both. Um, so that's it. What is your educational background? Ooh, that's a good one. So um, some of you may know I was a 23-year Air Force veteran, but my Bachelor of Science was actually from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, which is a beautiful place. If you haven't gone to visit, I suggest you do. I got a bachelor's in computer science from the Air Force Academy, and then I got a master's of computer systems administration from the University of Maryland University College, which they've renamed to something else now. I don't even know what they're calling it now, but out of College Park, Maryland. And then I received a master's of command control communications, computers and information systems from the Air Force Institute of Technology in Dayton, Ohio. And then recently I received a master's of public administration from Regent University. So that is my educational background. Um, I'm glad you're enjoying them. We will absolutely follow these up. We'll try and figure out a good time frame so they're not too often, but that we can answer um, questions as far as we can. What's the status on the new rec center? I'll retouch on that. Uh, the rec center right now is in a feasibility stage study. Basically, we're trying to revise the design based on community input on what people really want, but trying to match it up with the costs available and, more importantly, what it would cost to run and maintain. So that's really where we're at right now. And then we will try to see if we can um, raise enough money to build it with philanthropic donations, and then take a ballot initiative for maintenance and operation. So you probably won't see anything for a couple more months, but then expect some fundraising campaigns and get out there and support them if you would like a new rec center. Uh, when did you create the CVB and the TBID? The City Commission created both of those. CVB was before I got here. Was can't tell you the time frame on that. TBID, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. The City Commission passed legislation that was needed to stand that up. Mm-hmm. Are there ways the city can encourage or implement filling in gaps in sidewalks in residential neighborhoods? Yes, but nobody would like it. So property owners are responsible for their sidewalks, and there's a couple basically um, different ways that can be done. Obviously, you can do it on your own as a city, as a property owner. You can replace your sidewalk at any time. Please coordinate with the city just so we know what's going on. Um, the other way is the city can send out notices that say it's a safety hazard and give you a certain amount of time to get that done. We try not to do that because sometimes it can be a significant cost burden. But if it does need to be done, there are also programs through the city where you can get a loan from the city and it can be assessed on your property taxes. We do have a fund that helps with that. And then finally, there is what we call an emergency clause. If we feel it's a truly um, safe, big safety or health risk or ADA accessibility problem, the city can come in and do the work, and then we would bill you on your property tax bill. So that is the way. Um, I don't know if we're really going to get a rec center, but I hope so, and I think we're moving in the right direction. It's just going to be a process if we can find find the donors willing to help us fund it. And I think we're at least going to have a good product to convince people that it's a worthwhile project. Are there any plans to pave gravel roads? And then there's specifically a list of some of the roads. There aren't any plans to pave any current gravel roads. Um, Basically, unfortunately, and I wish this was different, but when those particular neighborhoods were built, there wasn't a requirement to pave the streets in the subdivisions. That currently is not the case. Any new subdivision that is built, as you can tell with the Northtown subdivision, um, has to improve the streets that will be within that subdivision. So if you live on an unpaved street, and I do, you can get together if you want to have those streets paved, but it will be at the property owner's cost. Um, so you can do that through a special improvement district. You can request that through the city, um, and we will facilitate getting the work done, and then again it will be assessed on your property taxes. That really is the only current method to get it done. If we wanted to do a much larger project where we paved a significant portion, specifically of the north side, which is where most of the gravel streets are, it would probably take a mill levy to be able to pay for it. And so that's something that if we, if you feel strongly about as residents, go ahead and start campaigning for that, and we could do a citywide mill levy to pave all the streets in the city. And I would, if you're going to do that, I would encourage you to throw alleys in that too. Uh, but the cost of paving the streets and the alleys in town right now that are not paved,
It was $1 million a mile, isn't it?
it's going to be millions and millions of dollars. I don't know if it'll reach the 100 million mark, but it would be definitely tens of millions of dollars. Um, is there any talk of updating, fixing the playground in Sacagawea Park? Depends on what part of the playground specifically you're talking about. But yes, one of the items on the list of funding for CARES Act was $50,000 in maintenance for Sacagawea Park specifically. That has not been approved yet, but that was one of the ideas. Um, Obviously, Pompey's Playground may need some upkeep and maintenance. That's one of the things we're looking at. Um, Maybe replacing or improving what used to be the wading pool, um, to make that a little easier to use for kids as well. And I don't know if we put it in, we also were looking at a wheelchair swing. I think that's been put in already for some ADA recreation in the park. So yes, that is on the list of things. And if you are if you're interested in that, I encourage you to get in touch with the Parks and Trails Committee. They are spearheading a lot of that. So if you can make it known to them that it's a priority, they will make it a priority, and then the city commission will know that it's a priority. That's the easiest way to get your voice heard as far as parks and trails go. Okay, I think to plant a tree in the boulevard, we need approval. What about people who replace grass with gravel? Does that need approval? It does not currently. It cannot be paved, but it can be replaced with gravel. There's no current city ordinance on that. And the reason right now that you have to get approval to plant a tree is twofold, and I'm sure Marshall will correct me on this if I'm wrong. Uh, from our tree board, he's had questions earlier. But one, we really want to increase the variety of trees. With the threat of the emerald ash borer and the number of ash trees we have, we really don't want to plant a lot more ash trees, really any more ash trees. But there's also a list depending on where you plant it. One, so you don't get the roots that spoil the sidewalks. A lot of the sidewalk problems we have is because inappropriate trees were planted too close to the sidewalk and the roots wreak havoc on the sidewalk. Or you don't want to plant tall trees underneath power lines because then you end up with some of those weird trees you see that are cut out like, I don't know, some kind of bonsai tree to get around the power lines and the cable lines. So that is why you have to get approval for a certain kind of trees. And we have a list of approved trees. Yep, on the Public Works website, you can look at it there. Um, is there plans to expand the city limits? No, not right now. In fact, if anything were to happen, I would say we would probably reduce the city limits, but there's going to have to be some talking about that first. I think there's some areas that are probably not appropriate for development that we currently have inside the city limits, and there probably should be some discussions on de-annexing those properties. But no, the city does not look to, in general, expand the borders at all. If we're brought proposals by developers, uh, or requests from landowners to annex, we have to, by state law, analyze each one of those on a case by case basis. But there's no desire from the city right now to expand the footprint um, in any certain direction, with the exceptions being the ones we already talked about, as far as areas that are islands already inside the city, um, or already operating basically as part of the city or hooked to city utilities. All right.
Whose responsibility to maintain the alleys?
Um, so I'm not sure who you talked to. The city does grade the alleys, so if that's a grade issue, we could work on that. If it's a different issue, it really depends if it's an alley issue or a property issue. But please talk to Public Works if you haven't already. If you don't understand um, the answer, please feel free to reach out and we'll try and get you a better explanation. Alleys are hard, so trying to maintain the gravel surfaces in town is very difficult. And it gets worse on wet years, which we've had a couple of. Um, and due to a lack of a uh, stormwater system in Livingston, the vast majority of our stormwater is surface runoff, um, which is efficient and cheap, but leads to the kinds of problems where you get water running into alleys, you get water running into residences, because there is no actual stormwater sewer system. Um, we are looking at creating a stormwater utility to try and change that throughout the city. Um, for those of you that don't like the huge dips in the roads, that's also the same reason. It's the surface water runoff. Those dips are that deep, so the water will run across. That's how the stormwater is getting to where it needs to go. So stormwater is an issue that we are going to have to deal with, specifically as we grow. If we get to the 10,000 resident mark, there are some state requirements for stormwater to be treated. And until we did the downtown project, none of the stormwater from Livingston was treated before it ran into the creeks and tributaries. So, and that's an issue that's going to have to be addressed. One, even if we don't grow, we should address it. But if we do, we'll have to by state regulation, or we'll face some punishments or penalties in that case. Um, what's your favorite thing about our city? I kind of covered that earlier. I think it really is the small town feel. I just love uh, being in a small town. It's that kind of neighborly, friendly place that you want to be, where you can send your kids out riding their bike, and you know the people that you meet in the grocery store or walking down the street. Let's see. I know there was concern about the ash trees in town having to cut many of them down due to the bug infestation. Is that still a concern? It's a concern, but we are not. Uh, we're not in the process of trying to remove all the ash trees. Um, we will probably remove some of them and replace them with different species to increase um, variety. Um, and currently, the emerald ash borer is not here yet, so we don't have to worry about the infestation right now. But there's going to be an entire plan. The tree board has been working on that. They've been doing a great job, and they just got some grant money to create a plan for how we're going to work on that, when we're going to replace, when we're going to treat, and how we increase our variety. And really, the goal is to make us resilient um, if the emerald ash borer makes it out here. So, what shenanigans are you referring to in your letter to the editor today that you believe are going on in our city? Oh, I've got 6 kids. There's shenanigans going on all over. Um, it's, I think it's a great community, and one of the reasons because it has a great sense of humor. So I think there's all kinds of shenanigans going on, uh, mostly the good kind.
Your
Uh,
cat's tail must be tired.
yeah, anybody that's admiring my solar powered tail wagging cat, that's a gift from our sister city in Japan. So that's one of the nice things that we get to have around here. So that is a official solar powered Japanese kitten. What is the long-term outlook for Livingston's municipal water supply? So the good news on water is we are in a much better situation than most of Montana. We have a significant water supply from underground sources and the Yellowstone River, and water isn't an issue now, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't, one, conserve it, and two, plan for the future. Um, we have a significant well capacity in the city right now and some significant storage. And as we grow, we'll try and maintain that. Um, there are some issues as far as the distribution system goes. Both the east and west end of town are on dead end runs. Basically, there's no looping on that side. So if there was a break, um, so if there was a break there, they wouldn't. There's no way to get water to the rest of the line. PFL is on that kind of system, and unfortunately, Livingston Healthcare is also on that kind of system. So we'll look at possibly getting loops installed. That was one of the ideas to be included with a crossing was a looping of the water in that system to make that a safer water system for anyone in that area, and possibly an additional municipal well on the east side so that there's a water source on the east side of the river if that line, transmission line to across the bridge were ever to break. Um, but as far as water sources go, we are in a really good spot. Uh, so you've noticed some trees in Secretary Park that have big red X's painted on them. What does that mean? I am not sure. I'm not sure if you've seen some red dots around town. That was part of a study we were doing with sight lines and corners, but I do not know for sure what the trees in the park have red X's on them for. But we can check and add that answer to this page tomorrow. All right, what else you guys got? Um, See, I started talking about air quality, and you guys came up with all kinds of stuff. That was great. What other items can I update you on? We did the rec center, we did crossing, we did um, CARES Act funding. We kind of explained that. Um,
Strategic planning.
talked about the strategic plan. We covered a lot tonight, so I appreciate all the questions. There's some really good stuff in there. Um, the question is, how can I get my street graded? So everything should be on a schedule. Um, I can check and see when that street is scheduled for grading. Obviously, we don't do a lot of grading during the winter. Most of that's done during the summer because it's hard to grade the frozen dirt. Um, but we can check and see when it's on the schedule. Uh, that is an issue. So paving is great in the fact that it reduces the amount of gravel that we have to grade. There are, oh, I don't want to give you the number off my top of my head, but I think there's over 20 miles of gravel streets in the city, and so getting those graded on a regular basis is difficult, um, especially as we have suffered some personnel losses through both just natural attrition and COVID over the last season. So we've been short manned in many departments. So you probably did not see the level of service that we usually give. So hopefully that'll improve this year. We are back up to full strength in almost all the departments now, um, and we will work from there. All right, where does Livingston's garbage go? That's a great question. So for those of you that don't know, there is no landfill in the county. So all of both the county's solid waste and the city's solid waste um, comes to our transfer station. So you drop it off there. If you haven't ever looked, it's a great system. It gets dropped on the floor, and our guys push it into the semis that are waiting down below to receive that trash. That is a contract that we have with Waste Management. They actually haul it from here to a landfill in Cascade County, just outside of Great Falls. So any garbage produced here that's not green waste, that's not trees, grass, and those kind of things, will be trucked to Cascade County, just outside of Great Falls. Why don't we have a curbside recycling program? What can the community do to get this happen? The short answer to that is cost. A curbside recycling program is very expensive, um, and right now we don't have the funds to do that. If you're interested in that, I think there's two routes you could go. You could we could look for a commercial carrier, but it's unlikely with the size of town that a commercial recycler is going to come in and pick that up. You do see some of them around town that pick up recycling from some of the larger places. Um, but if we want to turn that into um, if we want to turn that into a city program, it's going to require higher fees. And I don't know what that would cost. It would have to be trucks. It would have to be specialized equipment for that to separate the different kinds of recycling. It's a big undertaking, but it could be done. We would just have to have enough of the citizenry um, willing to sign up for it and pay for it. And that's probably the biggest problem is um, while we could come up with a program for it, if it's not a mandatory program, we wouldn't necessarily guarantee the participation we needed. When do city offices move into the new building? Will taxpayers have any expense for the new building? So we don't know yet when we'll move in. We're having some upgrades done to the building so that it fits our needs. So it will really depend on uh, the schedule of those contractors and when that work gets done. We would like to move into um, sometime in the April May timeframe. But no, there will be no. It depends on what you mean by expense for the building. Yes, the building's bought with tax money and it's maintained with tax money. So yes, all the money to maintain the building will be tax money, just like all the money that went to pay for the rent at finance was tax money. If you're meaning, is there an additional cost to that? No, the building is purchased. There will be some, so there'll be some costs for the upgrades. There'll be some cost to move our internet service from um, the finance building to this building. But once we get it set up, we will then save the cost of rent at the finance building, which is significant. And we will actually receive rent, well, we currently receiving rent for um, for the organizations that occupy the building. So a lot of that will be offset. Um,
When will the green boxes return?
how much does it cost? And this is a question on the recycling again. Our local recyclers just aren't super reliable. Um, I can't give you a cost off the top of my head, but really, basically, what you're talking about is another garbage route for the entire city, depending on how many people participate. So it's significant. Um, I think most places I've been, recycling costs $20 to $50 a month if you want curbside pickup. But that's East Coast and that's more expensive. But um, it would be significant. When will green boxes return? I'm going to guess that that question is actually about green cans and not green boxes. The county's in charge of the green boxes. I don't want anything to do with those. Um, so this probably plays into the recycling question. So the green cans were a service that the city was providing based on excess capacity, meaning we had trucks and people that weren't busy picking up garbage, so um, we could pick up green cans. Uh, with the increase in the population of Livingston, that's no longer the case. We don't have any excess capacity for green cans. Additionally, it was a service that wasn't available to everyone, which wasn't really equitable. The people that had green cans, I'm sure, loved the service, but the people that couldn't get them probably didn't think it was worth the money we were spending on for a service that they were locked out from. So we will be going to a new model this spring. You will be able to get green cans, but it will be a pay service, and that will help get us the extra equipment we need to run those routes. Look for more information on that in our spring flyer to include some rates and how to go about getting your green cans. And now the service will be available citywide, not just for the people that already had it. Um, so I think that might answer the next question on the green cans. Um, so why do they need to be charged for? Again, the answer is we don't have any excess capacity to do that for free, and we actually weren't doing it well anyway because we were, I don't want to say we were discriminating against parts of the city, but we certainly weren't equitably serving the entire city with that service because it wasn't available. So now this will be available citywide. It just will have the costs associated with this.
He's ready for the creek to feed. Come on and sit down, and normal fun.
Hey, Frank, we'll look for your special event application shortly. Um,
Do you think of ammonia cars? I found a tweet made by Care Bears, maybe Greta Thunberg.
um, anybody that wants to talk about ammonia cars, there's some information there. The city, as far as let's talk a little bit about vehicle fleets. One of the goals in the strategic plan is to create a and there's another question on it. Electric cars is to create an electric car infrastructure to be ready for the need for chargers. So we did that in a very limited capacity next to Neptune's on Clark. You'll see a couple of chargers there. There is some talk about trying to get a level 3 charger, so basically a charger that can handle Teslas and that kind of that type of vehicle, a little more higher end vehicle. Um, and so that is something that we're still looking at and will probably expand in the future. The question is, do we know if they're being used? And actually, yes, we do have an app that tracks that. I don't have the information on me right now, but we do have basically it's a computer app that tells us how often they're used. Um, People ask about why would we do that. There's a few reasons. Well, I do it because it's in the strategic plan, and that's my direction on what to do. But not only is it an environmentally sound practice as far as encouraging residents to get um, electric vehicles and making the infrastructure available to them to make that easier. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. They probably won't get used until they're available, and then it's going to take a while for people to get the type of vehicles that would make that um, heavily used. But additionally, I think from a tourism perspective, and this is a question we talked about a little bit earlier, uh, a lot of our tourism, and I can't tell you the exact percentage, but a lot of it's from California, Oregon, Washington, right? Especially in the age of COVID, people are staying closer to home, a lot more driving. A lot of residents there do have electric vehicles. And if we can get our city um, on the map, and in this case the app map that tells you where you can charge, we'll draw some of those tourists in. And if we place the chargers downtown, we draw them downtown and not just to the gas station at the exit. And that's especially true um, of of people out there that might be driving Teslas. And I'm sure there are people on here that could give you better information. But the last time I checked, the average household income of somebody that owns a Tesla is like $250,000. Um, I would love for them to come to downtown Livingston, park their Tesla and plug it in for 30 minutes, and then be able to walk around our downtown and experience what's there and support some of our local businesses. We have visitor center here. With that, would you agree there's no need for another visitor center as proposed? I haven't seen the proposal for the visitor center, so I can't really comment on it. Um, I guess that's it. I haven't seen the proposal, so I don't know. Um, all right. So any more questions? All right, you guys are good. We're like 15 minutes from the end of the scheduled time, and that's great. I'm glad that we had a lot of questions. Let's see, any other issues that I can provide you some information on? Um, um, so one other topic I'll touch on real quick because you're listening and I love it to be able to share information with you guys. Um, a lot of times I've been asked, why aren't we doing certain things in our city code? Hey, Bozeman does this, why don't we do this? Or Billings is doing this, why don't we do this? And a lot of times the answer is because we are a general powers form of government. So please don't fall asleep. I know this is bureaucratic speak now. Um, there's two basic forms of government, not types of government. Types of government are like whether you have a mayor or a commission manager, but forms of government. We're a general powers, and the easiest way to explain that is we can do whatever the state has explicitly said we can do. Um, the other type is a charter government, and that's what is found in most of Montana: Bozeman, Billings, Missoula, Helena, even Laurel, a lot of smaller communities. And a charter government basically says we are self-ruled, and only we can do anything the state hasn't told us we can't do. And the difference between what the state has told us we can exactly do and what the state hasn't told us we can't do is really big. And so if we want more flexibility in the type of ordinances we write, um, things we're able to do with our city boards, city programs, we will need to change our form of government to a charter form of government. So if you're interested in that, if you see, we have a committee that's looking at that right now. They'll come out with some recommendations. If you see that and you would like some more flexibility in that, please support it. It's going to have to be a vote. So there you go. There's your governmenty stuff for tonight. All right. Okay. I haven't seen any other questions. Thanks a lot for showing up. I really appreciate it. Really good questions. I love that you guys are engaged. Hopefully, you thought they were good answers. If not, if you felt like you didn't get an answer, um, not that you didn't like the answer, but that you didn't actually get an answer, feel free to shoot us an email. We will answer that as soon as we can. If you want to comment on the city Facebook page, that's great too. Um, and as always, check out the agendas, see if there's anything you're interested in at the city commission meetings, and we will see you there. Um, and I guess that is it. Happy holidays to all of you. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Uh, Anything else that you support? If you're Canadian, Happy Boxing Day. It's coming up. Um, if you're a Seinfeld fan, Happy Festivus. Uh, Whatever it takes. I really hope you enjoy this time, especially in the age of COVID. Take some time to really step back, relax, spend some time with family, and enjoy the holiday season. So have a great night, and I hope to talk to you later.